All right, let's look at some recent comics. These are mostly 2021 comics, but not all. Some are just a little older, but a lot of these are from 2021, the current year. Be sure and stick around at the end because I'm saving the best for last. But anyways, let's begin with the ones that I did not like as much. So these first two I could not even finish. The first was Barry Windsor-Smith's Monster, which, Monster or Monsters? I can't even remember. Monsters? Whatever, I didn't like it. I had high expectations too because I like Barry Windsor-Smith's art, and it looked like it's like a 400-page book. The line work that he does looks incredible. I can see Frank Miller being influenced by Barry Windsor-Smith in a way that I never really realized. But I only made it about 40 pages into it because, not the art looks really wonderful, but the story and the writing, the dialogue just felt really bad. Yeah, so if you finish this, tell me what you think of it and should I keep going? Well, I took it back already, but I could get it again if I really want to, but I don't think I want to because most of the writing just felt like the worst 1980s comics. Like imagine like the worst kind of dialogue in superhero comics from the time, Marvel and DC, like this kind of military industrial complex villains, and it just seemed not worth 400 pages of my time, so I gave it the boot. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I went back at it twice. I read like 20 pages. I'm like, this is horrible. I can't read this. But I gave it another shot, and I realized again, this is horrible, and I just could not keep going. So anyway, that's my take on it. Another book I didn't dislike as much. The title was PERRAMUS, Alberto Brecchia, who I don't believe I had read before this. Maybe I have, but I couldn't recall. He's kind of a staple, I think, in European comic scene. But this book was another massive book that I liked the art. But again, I think I preferred this to Monsters or whatever that book is called. But it was, I don't know, just the characters were a little not there for me, and I just couldn't keep going with it. So I think my impression of Brecchia is that he's a really good designer, really good artist, illustrator. Well, anyways, let me cut away from that book, which I did not finish, to a book by him that I did finish, much shorter book called Dracula. I think I prefer this one for a few reasons. One, it's in color, but two, there's no dialogue. It's all silent, which I kind of appreciate in comics. I just kind of like the moments when there isn't dialogue and when you're just kind of forced to work with the images alone. There's something about that in this kind of cave painting sort of way. So I did like Dracula a little more, but I wouldn't say I don't feel any great compulsion to read a ton of more Alberto Brecchia, but it was okay and it was enjoyable, and I liked some of the fluidity of the art. Moving on, next book, I read another Junji Ito book. I did a review of a few of his titles a long time ago, and this was, I liked what I read before, but again, it wasn't like I gotta read this guy again, but I was curious enough to see him do a longer book. This is the longest story by him I've read that is horror too. Like one of the books I read was his Cat Diary, which is probably my favorite book by him, but this was his more traditional genre of horror, and I didn't care for it. I think for the most part horror just doesn't work for me, and I didn't care for this story. I like the art, his art. That seems to be a running theme in these books. I like the art, but I do not like the story or the dialogue. There were just a few moments that I appreciated in Censor, but unless you're a die-hard Junji Ito fan or horror fan, I don't really recommend it. All right, moving on, we have Mobius art on this book by Alejandro Jodorowsky. I think this is the first Jodorowsky comic I've read. I've seen a few of his movies back when, but yeah, this is his first time reading any books by him, and this is a very science fiction-y kind of, think Star Wars, Dune sort of influence, and it's kind of a well-known book. It spawned other books in the INCAL series and the spin-off book, The Metabarons, none of which I have read yet, but I may read some in the future. I have kind of mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, Mobius's art is pretty incredible. It does get a little inconsistent at times, but for the most part, especially in the beginning, it just feels like there's this constant overturning of images, new imageries. Like there's this resistance to having the same characters for too long from sticking in one situation. There's this constant movement, constant introduction of new characters, new situations. And I appreciated that aspect of it, this real creative unfolding of something. But some of the dialogue didn't always work, and some of the, I don't know, just some of the overall feeling of what these characters are and where this story is going didn't always work for me. And I don't know if I was totally on board with the ending and finding it like a very satisfying ending, but I think this book, certainly for the era, it just feels very, metal, heavy metal magazine. I kind of always could see the storytelling was very different from American comics, because there's just this kind of flippancy about both character and plot that you don't have in American comics, or a lot of American comics. And I just remember those heavy metal mags. Like you could get them like at 7-Eleven when I was growing up, and they were incredible artists, and then just kind of very abstract and surreal storylines. That was the big thing, and I think a lot of that comes from Mobius, his influence on heavy metal. And this story, which is just kind of like you discover one of these key stories or pieces of the puzzle that, this now makes sense, all these other knockoffs of this. I don't know if that's entirely the case, but I mean, you could say this is a knockoff of Star Wars or whatever, or Dune. All right, now we're getting into the territory of the books that I liked and I'm recommending. Let's start with this one, Peepers. This was a very visually cool book. Some of the pages are just it's very, I don't know how to describe it. It's a Fantagraphics book, and I think that there's a certain style. I was thinking like Jesse Jacobs, Johnny Ryan a bit. A lot of, I don't know, just beautiful art. Kind of an expensive book. I want to say it's $40, $39.99. It's kind of a big, but I think it's a beautiful coffee tables type book. Interesting storyline. I think the art is the reason you're coming to this book. The story was enjoyable, but it's very, I think underground comics, just very, I don't know, just a very flowing, weird book. I enjoyed it though, and I am recommending it. It's just, I don't know it's almost like a kid's book. I want to say it's like, I would say like the first half of this book, it's almost a book you could read to your kids, but then it does venture into some territory that most parents probably aren't comfortable with their kids reading. So yeah, I am recommending it though. Peepers by Patrick Keck. Good book. And then we get to City of Belgium, which I finally read. I think this is the second thing I've read by Brecht. Evans. The first one was Panther, which I enjoyed a lot. This one though is very good. I think along with the other book that I recommended, which was Crash Site, I think those two are my favorite graphic novels this year, this one and that. This one, let me show you some of the art in this. So this is another design and comics just masterpiece. Some of these pages, he doesn't use panels for the most part. He just kind of flows moments together into the page. This book is really about nightlife, and I don't know, it's kind of I think it came out before coronavirus originally in Europe, but it kind of feels like a reminiscence of nightlife before coronavirus. Kind of follows three main groups of characters, and I just found it incredible. I think this guy is just... There were a few parts with the dialogue that I felt like they could have been trimmed down, but I think I just like to see every few pages when he does some new technique. It just feels like you have so many different memories from this book after reading it that are unique in comics. Like the way he uses the page and everything is just wonderful. But I like this book quite a bit. I am recommending it a lot. I'm not sure if I like Panther or this one better, because it's been so long since I've read Panther, but I need to read some more of this guy, because he's pretty incredible. City of Belgium, I think this is drawn in quarterly, this one, $29.95. So I would say this one yeah, is the best of this current lot that I'm reviewing. I'm also recommending these little LULU books that I finally started. These things are pretty nice. They're like 300 pages, and I think this is the most little LULU I've ever read in my life, which I kind of just saw her as a Nancy, Ernie Bushmiller Nancy. I kind of sort of a knockoff of that, but she is emerging as her own personality, and Sluggo is not Lulu's friend. What's his name? I'm blanking on his name. Not Alvin. Tubby, that's right. Tubby, who I guess had his own comics for a while. I think these are some of the best all ages comics from the 1950s. The series that not Fantagraphics, Brown and Quarterly is doing is going to be 5 volumes. I think about 3 of them are out now, and each one's about 300 pages. So killer books. And then finally, I'm reading this SCUTTLE and His Pals book by Basil Wolverton. Wolverton is sort of a personal hero of mine in comics because, in terms of, I feel like he was. I don't even know if there would have been Mad Magazine if it weren't for Basil Wolverton. His sense of oddness. I can't think of anything quite as odd in the 1940s and 30s. That golden age of comics that is quite as just silly, in which every character feels like they're kind of zany and out of it, and there's no center of normality to guide anything. It's just whatever is weird, and the dialogue is so cool. If you've never read Basil Wolverton, I do recommend this collection. Really, any book by him. I used to have one of his Powerhouse Pepper collections. I think this one, though, like, it's in color, and not all the reprints are. So this is a good place to start with Basil Wolverton. He's kind of known for his more serious stuff too, like Space Hawk, but I definitely prefer his zanier side with books like this or Powerhouse Pepper. So that's a wrap for this roundup of comics. What about you? What are your favorite comics from 2021? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and check them out and review them in some future episode of Adam Reviews the Comics.